Hello again from the garden on a lovely afternoon. I should actually be in the beehives today, especially the smaller one there, putting a queen excluder on and putting another box on the top so that the bees have got some space for their increasing brood. They'll fill both the brood boxes there and also so that they've got some space to put their honey. But even though the sun is blinding me at the moment, I do know that there is rain coming, and that's why it's a little bit busy, because they're all trying to get back before the rain comes. And from bitter and painful experience, I know it's not a good idea to get inside of the beehives when there is bad weather coming, because the bees get very, very cranky about it. They're just amazing, don't you think? I love them. I can sit here for hours. They're flying around me. I'm wearing a blue t-shirt, so hopefully those who are heading for the blue hive won't land on me, which they do occasionally, but if I'm careful, they will just get off me and fly back to where they want to be. And it's actually always when I'm sitting around here like this that I tend to get stung, so I shall be moving away very shortly, but they're happy and busy bees and they've got lots to do, so I shall leave them to it. The girls are having a little drink at their favourite watering hole. That area that they're standing in is normally lush green grass, but it has been so wet and they have picked it over so much looking for anything green to eat that there's not a lot left there anymore. They've carefully dug all of the leaf litter from the apple tree into that ground, and I'm expecting that that tree is going to have some amazing fruit on it this year, because it will have been fertilised so well by the chickens being under it all the time. But the reason that we're here in the garden today is because I want to start harvesting some of the nasturtiums that I've got growing back here. Okay, so these are growing in what tends to be a little bit of a wasteland for me behind the raised beds. And there's obviously the garden fence, and then this is one of those peach trees all getting ready to sprout and do what it will for summer. But we're here looking for the nasturtiums. Nasturtiums can be a weed here in New Zealand, and if you look on the Weed Busters site you will see them classified as a weed, and they will tell you how to get rid of them chemically, which I don't agree with, but that's what some people do. I like to use them as a ground cover, because what they're doing here actually is stopping dead in its tracks a lot of the kikuyu that we get in the garden, and we're working really hard to get rid of it. The thing that is being most effective, aside from the chickens, is the bark or the mulch that you'll see on the paths and the garden beds. So it's keeping a lot of nasty weeds down. There's also a lot of water that comes off the neighbours' concrete and the side of their house and things like that. They're a little bit above us, so it also acts as a bit of a, it's not so much a drain as the plants grow, they use the water, it evaporates back into the air, it saves us with erosion and things like that. And obviously I love picking the flowers for salads. You can see a few little flowers over here. The chickens are regaling us with their song as they like to while we're out here. There's probably more laying going on there. So it's a South American plant that grows really, really well in Auckland, and I think most people know nasturtium. It's got these beautiful, beautiful circular leaves, and what a lot of people don't know is that it's a really fantastic medicinal weed, and I say weed in quote marks. What I'm going to do today is gather some of these lovely leaves, and the way that I will be gathering them is, here's a nice leaf here. I will just be breaking them off with my finger, and so I have a nice flat looking leaf like this, and then I will be drying them, and once I've dried them I'm going to turn them into a tincture. And I don't use alcohol for my tinctures because I am an alcoholic, and alcohol's not something that I really should have going on in my life. So I'm going to try these ones. I could put them in glycerin. I have somebody at the moment who's making tinctures for me and he's using glycerin. But the other thing I'm going to try is honey. If you can hear me, I'm going to try honey, because of course we have the bees back here doing their thing. and we have a lot of honey available to us, so I'm all for using what we have available in our own garden to do the best that we can with it. So to me, it's... Do you mind, madam? Do you mind? We know that you're there. Okay, go and find the girls instead of yelling for them. There we go, that's what that was all about. So what was I saying? Yes, I was talking about we have a lot of honey and I have a lot of nasturtium. So I'm about using what I've got in the garden to make what I can with it. So you can see it's all up the back there, it's all through here. Like the chickweed I talked about the other day, it tries to get into the raised beds. It actually can't compete with the chickweed in here at the moment, but it tries to get into the raised beds, and I just pull it out. It's just amazing, and it suppresses all the other weeds which are much harder to get rid of, and this is just really easy to pull away and clear when I want to start planting again. So there we go, the extent of it goes down here, and I'm going to go and get a bowl now and start gathering some, and then I'll talk to you again about how I'm going to prepare it. I started to tell you a story the other day about the potatoes and I never finished it. So here's the potatoes that we've got growing. I planted these in the middle of winter. They're in a raised bed, which means that they're not getting too wet. See our little local lizards here. We've got lots of these little, they tell me they're invaders, but they're all over the garden, and if they can stay clear of the chickens, you know, they're welcome as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, back to the potatoes, I digress. And you can see more nasturtiums in the background. These potatoes I planted in the middle of winter when we still had frost happening, and I was a little bit concerned about whether or not the greenery would get away. And so they started sprouting, but I'd put compost in out of the deep litter system in the chicken pen. And what started to happen was the first thing that came up was the wheat seed that the chickens hadn't eaten. And I thought, oh no, I am going to just have a little wheat paddock here. And I thought, well, I'm not going to worry about it because it's winter, and you know, the worst thing that can happen is I can just chop it off at the base, and then the potatoes can continue to come through, and maybe even the wheat might act as something that any frost might land on top of. And what has actually happened in principle is the same sort of thing that I showed you in the hoop house the other day. So these potatoes, I don't know, they're probably 3 feet tall, I'd say, at the moment. And they're growing beautifully. And the wheat has pretty much been drowned out by the potatoes. And it's that same thing again, because the potatoes are growing vigorously and strongly because the soil is good with all of the nitrogen. So here we are. I'm hoping now that we're going to have some actual potatoes down here after all of this greenery, but we shall see. I may be throwing some bananas in here as well, just to make sure that we get some good solid potato growth. But we've certainly got some really good solid potato greens coming at the moment. And I have to net them off because I thought chickens were reasonably smart, but they're actually not smart enough not to eat the potato greens, and I don't really want them eating them because I don't think they're very good for the chickens. So there we have another example of the strong growth of one species getting on top of the growth of another without me actually even having to come in here and do any weeding. I don't grow conventionally, I'm very aware of that, but what I do know is that if I can find a way to get something to work where everybody's working happily together, then I'm going to do it. And the jury's out on how many potatoes we'll get out of here, but certainly we're not growing what I thought was going to be a wheat field, which is really, really interesting. Okay, so we've picked our nasturtium leaves. Here's my big bowl of them here. Barely even looks like I've touched anything, but I've been right along the edge of the garden. You can probably see a few little picking spots here, a little bit of extra gap. So I've been through the garden now, and I've picked from lots of different places. So because I have so many, I don't need to just stick to the one place for picking them. And that means too that if there's I don't know, I just feel like if there's any different sort of nutrients lurking in the soil anywhere, or some plants are growing better than others and, you know, accumulating minerals and good healthy things from different parts of the garden, well then we're going to get them. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my lovely bowl of nasturtiums back into the house, and I'm going to wash them, which seems like a counterintuitive thing to do if I am going to dry them, but I'm going to wash them just in case there's any little insecty bits on there, and then I'm going to run them through the salad spinner, and then we're going to dry them, and I will show you that process once I've got the washing and the spinning out of the way. I'm going to demonstrate 2 ways to dry your nasturtium leaves. I actually prefer to dry mine in a dehydrator, which I will show you shortly, but a method that anybody can use is to dry them in your oven. All you have to do is place some parchment paper on an oven tray and place the leaves of the nasturtium on the tray so that they can touch a little bit, but it's faster to dry them if they don't touch at all. So you're going to want to place your leaves on the tray, pop the tray in the oven, and make sure that you've got your oven at its lowest possible temperature setting, because you don't actually want to cook the leaves, you just want to remove all of the water. You can leave your oven door slightly ajar, or you can do what I like to do, which is set the oven on fan so that there is air circulating, and then every so often just pop the door open a little bit just to let any moisture out. But having said that, my most preferred method is the dehydrator. And what I do is, if I've got large leaves like these nasturtium leaves, I just tear them up into pieces. That just makes for maximum drying and placement inside the tricky circular dryer that I have. It actually, in this kind of a dehydrator, doesn't matter if the leaves are slightly touching each other, because they will shrink as they dry, and there is also plenty of air circulation. Now, this kind of dehydrator that I use has the dehydrating element at the top, so what I do every so often is turn it off and take all of the trays apart so that I can move the top tray down to the bottom and just generally shuffle the trays around a little bit to make sure that we've got even drying happening. So, once you've dried your nasturtium leaves, and that's going to depend on your oven or your dehydrator, or if you're even lying the leaves out in a basket to dry naturally. Once they dry, the fun part is scrunching them up, because they sound amazing, and breaking them up into smaller chunks. Now, you could store them dried and whole if you wanted to in a paper bag, but these ones I'm actually going to be using quite quickly, so it doesn't matter if they get too much air on them, because what happens when you dry a herb is you expose the edges of it to air. When you break a herb up more, you're going to have more oxidation happening, because there is more parts of the herb that's available for the air to get to it. So it makes sense that if you leave the herb whole, then it's going to keep for longer than if you break it up into lots of little pieces. But as it is, I normally use a lot of the material that I dry within 6 to 12 months, and you're pretty safe as long as you're keeping your herbs dry, somewhere dry and dark and cool, that you're going to be able to keep them for at least 6 months anyway. So once you've scrunched them all up, pop them into a jar and try not to spill too much on the bench. It's always tricky business. And there you are. You've got your from the garden dried and saved herbs ready for you to use them however you're going to use them. And the other thing is, make sure that you do pop a label on your herb, because you might remember right now what it is that you've been picking and preparing, but I can assure you that when that jar has been sitting in the cupboard for more than a few months, you pretty much won't have an idea of what it is, especially if you've crushed it up. So make sure you put a label on your jar, And there is your fresh dried herb ready for you to use however you wish. If you're interested in learning more about how you can use and grow herbs in your garden, hit the subscribe button and the little bell and you'll get a notification when I upload my next video. See you soon. Love and letters. Bye for now.